Hey, Float Magic fans. Shawnee coming to you today. I had to share this bowl. This is one of my newest purchases for my own personal collection. It's a Tibetan singing bowl that I purchased down in Sedona in my most recent trip through spring break. Anyway, it really sets the mood for what I'm hoping to speak with all of you today. This is going to be a podcast that's near and dear to my heart. It's been a lot of things that have been coming to the surface. A lot of people have been coming into our center and to me addressing this very thing. And it's on our collective consciousness and what we're doing to raise our frequencies so that we can be tapped in and tuned in and truly to the purpose of our life and why we're all here. I want to preface by saying I'm no guru. I'm no expert. I have a lot of life experience. I love to research. It's one of my favorite things to do, so much so that I wanted to take my nursing career into primary mental health nurse practitionership. And so I've done studies in that way. I pull in a lot of studies surrounding ceremony and types of modalities that are non-traditional that can really help us access a portion of our consciousness, portions of our soul that really help us open up to why it is we're all here. So I'm going to come to you and speak to that today. So I've had a lot of experiences over the last few weeks that has put me in touch with how important this message is in my heart. And that's the message of consciousness. How are we showing up for the world today? Flotation therapy, that was where it came about. Was John C. Lilly was in the process of studying the edges of consciousness and wanting to understand where that conscious thought was ours and where it was the collective of the world around us. When that thought turned into action, the levels of our states of being, whether that be our theta and delta wave levels or just our awareness of where we're at. So a lot of fascinating things that he studied, and he took it upon himself to study in a lot of different areas. Psychedelics were part of his research. He did a lot of studies with LSD and dolphins, and because of the way dolphins communicate through sound, through frequencies. And this topic of frequencies comes up a lot. They're doing a lot of studies on how frequencies can affect different aspects of us, from disease through wellness, through energy exchanges. There's studies out there that show brain waves can be synced across walls and distance. It's just so fascinating what we're learning about in the facets of the brain. I wanted to share a little story I heard not too long ago. It was surrounding Albert Einstein. I was actually going to my internship for this float center back in 2019. I was headed over to Portland and I tapped into NPR, National Public Radio, and it was a story or a podcast about Albert Einstein's brain and what happened to it after his death, post-mortem. When Albert Einstein died, his family worked really hard to protect his brain. They didn't want his body and his brain turning into some science experiment. And rightly so. They wanted the legacy of his life to be preserved and not turn him into a lab rat. And so there was a lot of hesitancy when they were addressed time and time again about dissecting Einstein's brain so people could see what was in it. So there was some trusted scientists that eventually talked the family into the opportunity of looking into that brain, because here they had this genius of our time, truly, and the opportunity could be lost to understand certain aspects of what his brain contained that maybe lent toward his geniusness. So the family reluctantly allowed for this to happen. And it was put in the hands of a scientist named Harvey at Princeton. And he took it upon himself to dissect sections of the brain for study and gave it out to individuals that were experts in their field to see if they could figure out where his geniusness come from. And so what some of those studies came up with was, there was a lot of scientists involved, and there was a section of his brain in the parietal lobe. So our parietal lobe is located kind of right behind the ears. There's a lot of thinking and processing that happens in that space of our brain. And what was found in Einstein's brain is there was a heightened amount of glia cells. There's extra glia cells than what they've seen in other specimens that they studied. And so they kind of went down that road of where those glia cells, was that the reason for Einstein's geniusness? Was that the reason for his ability to take consciousness and project it in a way that brought about so much understanding in the way of time, space, and spatial relations, and all that he did for us in mathematics and everything. They also found that he had a higher density of neurons in his brain. There is something called the omega sign that is present, especially in musicians, people who have a very commanded sense of music and musicality will have this omega sign in their brain. And that was present in Einstein's brain because he was also very, very musical. Mathematicians and music tend to go hand in hand. And so that was also present for him. There was in his Broca area of the brain, they found that had some heightened, the Broca is our space for language and understanding. And there was some heightened neuron cells in there. They also found that he had extra convolutions or folds of these convolutes in his frontal lobes. In his right superior parietal lobe, there was also a lot of convolutions, which indicated to the scientists studying them that was where our right brain is where all our spatial awareness comes from, and where we kind of lose sense of time. And so that was a good indication of why he could connect the dots for our space-time continuum, is because he had a full grasp of understanding where time wasn't and able to quantify where it was. And so those were some big discoveries. But one area of the brain that they really wanted to study of his was the pineal gland. And in the pineal gland, again, there was these heightened neurons, but there wasn't a lot present. And in what I was listening to on this NPR is they talked about, ultimately the result of cutting up Einstein's brain and sending it out is that there was a lot of theories present, but we still really didn't know. Nobody could really conclude, conclusively that they could identify where Einstein's brain was truly more genius than the rest of ours. However, there was this thought about the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is of a lot of study in us right now, in the way of human thought and human consciousness. And a lot of people equate that the pineal gland is where the third eye is located. The pineal gland is kind of right here in the center of our eyes, and kind of is a pathway back to these voids in our brain. These voids hold a lot of cerebral fluid, cerebral spinal fluid in those capacities of these hollow areas, and the pineal gland kind of taps us into that. So yeah, there was a scientist that did a vast amount of study on the pineal gland. He was a French scientist. I've pronounced his name different in the past, but it's René Descartes. It's spelled Descartes. Descartes, but he is French, so it's René Descartes. He stated that the pineal gland was actually the seat of the rational soul. And so that's where our kind of spiritual mind rationalized with our reality. And with that, he also stated that messages from the outside world were thought to sharpen by the pineal gland or between the two eye center of the brain. He also found out that there was a lot of melatonin production that happened in that part of the brain, and that melatonin production was a lot more heightened as when we were younger. So when 7 and below have really, really high amounts of melatonin that are produced. And studies about melatonin have been all over the board, primarily because melatonin is only present when it's dark and when we're sleeping. That's when melatonin gets set in. And so people who sleep with TVs on or sleep with the lights on, you're not getting that melatonin production because it comes on into our bodies. It's produced by our pineal gland when it's dark, when the sun starts to go down, when the lights start to go down. And so for a long time, people were studying melatonin during the day when it was at lower levels anyway. So it was really hard to tap into when that was present. So anyway, it was discovered that below 7, melatonin is highly available in our system and it is a big factor of producing our sexual glands and our maturity. And then beyond 7, it starts to diminish. So as we grow into adulthood, it starts to fade away and we don't have nearly as much melatonin production. And that might be why as adults we have a hard time sleeping. Anyway, but back to this pineal gland discovery, they thought that was the only function of the pineal gland was that melatonin production. So all of the study of melatonin is kind of where people thought the pineal gland or scientists thought the pineal gland was important. And what they found out is in their study of frogs and a lot of other mammals and mammalians is that the pineal gland actually is a space of turning information into thought. And they found some frogs that they were studying and they called that the third eye. Isn't that fascinating? We call it often the third eye in yoga or in the chakra process. When we're talking about our chakra models and our spiritual process, and scientists actually called that the third eye in frogs. And so going back to the studies of Einstein, one of the things that were brought up is that his pineal gland had this heightened neuron configuration. And what they believed is that Einstein had the ability to tap into information out around him. That is where the heightened amount of his geniusness really stemmed from, was his ability to tap in to the information that was in the ether sphere and in the collective consciousness of what's around us. And so with that study and with that information, I've given that a lot of thought recently. And people talk often about the collective consciousness. People talk often about this energy field that we move in and out of collectively as humans experiencing the same existence at the same time. And wondering what that is and why are we so affected by one another, and why are we so affected by people that we're sharing a life with? Why are we so affected by the energies of people that come in and are in a bad mood when we're at work, right? Or maybe somebody that's driving erratically. Why are we so affected by that? And I can't help but conclude after listening to all this information that there is a way that we tap in to other people's understanding of how the world works around us. That's a pretty heavy realization in a lot of ways. After opening the center, I really took it upon myself to work on myself. I was opening the center for the tools that I knew could tap me in to that soul search, to that consciousness, to just turning back to what my mind and body are experiencing together. And that led me down a pretty rugged path, if I'm honest about it. It really challenged a lot of my belief systems. It challenged a lot of the roles that I was playing to exist safely in the worlds that I was existing in. It really challenged me to find my authentic self, to find the voice of my authentic purpose and to express it. And that put a lot of the life I was living in the balance. It put a lot of the items and the materialism and the things that were present in my life physically. It brought a lot of that into question as to what I needed to address in order to allow my frequency to rise so that I could tap in to the very purpose that I'm meant here to deliver. And it's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process, actually. It's a very challenging process to ignore the outcomes of everybody else around you and what they're doing. I realized that people had certain expectations set on me, certain expectations I had put on myself. And that's what I mean by role playing is I had set myself up. I'm a good cook. I'm a wonderful mother. I can show up in these ways for these people in my life, and they can count on me for these things. And that's a very that was a model of safety that I put in place for myself and the people around me. And those things are so important. But what I found is that I was quieting my voice and I was quieting my needs and my wants so that I could show up in those roles that other people expected me to do and that I expected of myself. And when I actually came face to face with addressing those types of roles, it was leading me far from the path of authenticity. So coming back to myself in those roles, I had to question everything that I was and everything that I was being and every way that I built reality and the safety net around my life. And I had a deep realization that, and you hear it often, that we're the creators of our destiny. We're the creators of our life around us. And that cycles back in through my life time and time again. And it takes on a different meaning every time I address that. And every time I get more information of just how valuable my showing up as my authentic self, how valuable that is in producing the type of life that is waiting for me. That's both beautiful and extremely terrifying. It's beautiful to know that I can call certain things in when I need it. There's people I can call on. There's family and friends around me who have been such a huge support system. There's mechanisms within myself. There's knowledge I already know, and those people around me are a reflection of reminding me of what I already know. And that's such a beautiful part of being in this space of having a collective consciousness. The terrifying part comes in when we realize that it is our responsibility and it is solely on our shoulders to show up for ourselves in the way that we know and need to do, the way we know how and the way we need to. Nobody's there to save us except ourselves. We have everything within ourselves to do it. And that can be beautiful and terrifying all in the same breath. There's been a lot of focus in our community of people who are leaving the existence of this world because it is overwhelming and it is unbearable at times. And the question keeps coming up of how do we address this? How do we solve this? I do not know. And that's not what this conversation's about. However, I'm a part of a lot of discussions And we see a lot of people who have lost hope that come into our space and who feel that they don't have what they need around them in order to survive in the world that they're in. And that's where their hopelessness gets lost. And what I've realized for myself is that I divinely have everything inside of me to be exactly what I need to be. Think of a cat. Let's take a cat. Cats survive. Cats thrive off of just existing. They have what they need. In fact, if they don't have what they need, they command humans to give it to them. And I have to admire the solitude and individuality of these animals that exist around us. They don't have jobs. They're not part of this rat race. I mean, it's beautiful that we have the knowledge and the ability to create such a complicated world. However, just existing is what we're here to do. Just existing in the moment is the gap that is some of the most beautiful opportunity of being human. We're given this short time to be humans and to experience every single emotion that our bodies experience. The only way we can have great joy is if we experience great sorrow. Otherwise, the joys aren't nearly as high. Eckhart Tolle had told us in his book, The New Earth, the deeper the sorrow, the greater the enlightenment. And I think to this process of people who are feeling overwhelmed and burdened by what this life gives, we need to understand that those moments are temporary. And those moments absolutely are real. They can be so overwhelming, but they also are the window to how beautiful this existence is and how wonderful it is that we're in these human bodies that experience these range of emotions at such levels of intensity that we don't want to leave this world behind. We don't want to leave this opportunity of truly existing in the fullness of ourselves. And if we can be a reminder to one another that is what we're here for, a reminder that we are here to truly live as our internal and authentic selves' most intimate being wants to live, just to be. Like I said, it's beautiful and it's terrifying all in the same breath. But so much of what we've done here at Float Magic and so much of the areas that we've created and the things that we pull in are for that very thing, is so that you can live in that moment, that you can remove everything from around you, so you can just experience what it feels like to just be present in the moment. Let the emotions rise up. Don't interpret it. Don't put it into action. Just let it be. See what that emotion is trying to teach you. See what that emotion is trying to share with you. Embrace the dark sides of yourself, because when we let go of what's dark in us, we're not fully integrated and whole. Our light is there to shine on those dark crevices so we can recognize the full aspect of who we are. So, if you haven't tried this, if you're curious, if you're wondering where you can grab that opportunity to just sit with the beautiful being that you are, please consider coming in and taking time in any one of our spaces, even our Zen garden and chill space, our salt cave, our massage chairs. We have levels of care at all dollar levels, at all comfort levels. If you really want to go deep, we can go there too. But I just wanted to share with you what has been so present on my heart and seems to be so present in many of the humans that I'm working with and interacting with in the world today. So thank you for tuning in. I do encourage you that if you're enjoying this podcast, that you go ahead and join us on the many platforms that we have out there. We are on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube. Anywhere where you're finding your podcasts, you can tap into the Float Magic podcast. And I'd invite you to come in and see what we're all about. And remember, it is perfectly okay to stay salty. We have all aspects of ourselves, so embrace them all. Thank you for tuning in.